Growing up, I was the lucky one. At least that's what everyone always told me. I was the daughter of a single mother, the woman everyone in our community called resilient, selfless, strong. My mom, who had supposedly escaped a violent, manipulative marriage, raised me all on her own. She worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so I could have enough, stayed up through the night sewing or studying so I wouldn't see her breakdown. She never dated, never took vacations. Everything she did, she said, was for me. I was told I was her miracle child, the one who gave her a reason to live. People adored her, and I did too. My older brother Mark was always the shadow in this story. I barely remembered him from childhood. 10 years older than me, lived with my dad after the divorce, and then eventually disappeared completely. Whenever I asked about him, my mother would shake her head with this mix of pain and frustration in her eyes. She'd say, "He chose your father." I tried, but he didn't want a family anymore, not after what your dad did to us. "What did Dad do?" I'd ask, quietly, afraid of the answer. And every time she'd pause before saying, "He was dangerous." That was enough for me. I stopped asking. Mark's name became taboo in our house. The only time he came up was when something went wrong. If I got a bad grade or came home late, she'd sigh and say, "Please don't turn out like your brother." So I grew up believing that he was broken, a drug addict, selfish, violent. He never called, never wrote, never visited, not even on my birthdays, not even when Dad died 5 years ago. And I hated him for that. I hated him for leaving me behind. I hated him for breaking Mom's heart. Until 3 months ago, when he showed up at my front door at 1:12 a.m., I still don't know how he found me. I hadn't seen his face since I was 8, but when I opened the door, I recognized him immediately. He looked exhausted, older than I imagined, and his hands were shaking. There was a long pause before he said anything. Then, out of nowhere, he muttered, "She lied to you, Emma, about everything." My heart dropped. He looked me straight in the eyes that looked so much like mine, and added, "Mom destroyed our family. You think she saved you, but she was the one who ripped us apart." I froze, not because I believed him, but because a part of me did. I slammed the door in his face, not because I was angry, but because I was terrified that he might be telling the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I kept playing his words over and over. What could he possibly mean? My mom was the one who tucked me in every night, who gave up her life for me, who fought to keep me safe. If Mark was telling the truth, then what had all of that been? A performance? The next morning, I confronted her. I didn't tell her what he said, just that he came by. She went pale. "Don't talk to him," she said immediately. "He's dangerous. He's sick. He's always been like this. He'll twist your head around and make you hate me." Then she started crying. She sat down at the kitchen table and covered her face. "I did everything I could," she whispered. "He never wanted to be part of this family. Not really." But something about her voice sounded rehearsed, like she'd said it before. And that's when I realized something I'd never considered before. For all the years I thought she was protecting me, she'd actually isolated me. I didn't call Mark for a week, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. I even looked him up online. Nothing much. A few mugshots, some old Facebook photos. He looked like a mess. My mother was right. But still, I called. He picked up on the first ring. And then he told me everything. Mark's voice over the phone wasn't the voice of a violent man, or a drug addict, or someone dangerous. It was quiet, hesitant, like someone afraid of being heard. He didn't launch into a rant. He didn't call Mom names or yell. He simply said, "You deserve to know the truth, but I'm not going to force it on you." That was the first time I realized how little I actually knew about my own family. So I asked him to talk, really talk. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town, public enough to feel safe, private enough for what I suspected was coming. I didn't tell Mom. I wasn't ready for her questions. Mark arrived looking like someone who had rehearsed a speech and was terrified of delivering it. He ordered nothing, just sat there, wringing his hands under the table. And then he started. "When the divorce happened," he said, "you were only 2. I was 12. Old enough to understand things, but young enough to be used." I didn't interrupt. I could feel my stomach tightening. "Mom didn't just take you and leave. She wanted full custody, not just of you, of the story. She wanted to erase Dad, to make sure you'd never ask questions, never remember him the way I did." I nodded slowly. "She said he was abusive." Mark tilted his head. "Was he?" "Sure, sometimes, but not the way she told you. He yelled, he drank. He wasn't perfect, but he never hit us, never laid a hand on her either. He just lost control of his life, and Mom hated him for it." He looked down, voice shaking. "She made me testify in court. She told me exactly what to say, that I'd seen him hit her, that I was scared for you. I didn't even know what perjury meant back then. I thought I was helping you, helping her." He paused. "I said it in front of a judge, Emma. I lied, because she told me it was the only way to protect you." I couldn't speak. Everything in my body wanted to reject it, to scream that he was lying. But part of me remembered. Flashes from childhood, her repeating, "You're safe now," me asking, "From what?" and her never answering. I asked him where he went after the trial. "I stayed with Dad for a while, but Mom made sure we were broke. She froze accounts, took the house, said she was doing it for the children, but really, she wanted him to suffer." "And me?" "She wouldn't let me see you, not once. Every birthday I asked. She always said no." I couldn't hold it in anymore. "But why didn't you call? Why didn't you try?" He finally looked me in the eyes. "I did. Every year, letters, messages, but you moved, changed numbers, changed cities, and Mom made sure I never knew where." That night, I went home in a daze. I opened the family photo albums, looking at pictures of me smiling next to Mom on school steps, at dance recitals, on Christmas morning. In every photo, something was missing, or rather, someone. There was no trace of my father, none of Mark, as if they had never existed. I looked through old birthday cards from Mommy, but there were no cards from Dad, no handwriting I didn't recognize. It was as if she had rewritten history, and I'd never even noticed. The next morning, I confronted her. I didn't accuse her, just asked, "What happened between you and Dad? The real story." She stood still at the sink, her back to me. "Why are you asking about that now?" "I met Mark." The silence that followed was suffocating. She turned around slowly, her face blank. "You don't understand what that man put me through," she said coldly. "I'm not talking about Dad," I replied. "I'm talking about Mark, about the lies." For a second, just one, something flickered in her eyes. Not guilt, not fear, defiance. "Everything I did was to protect you," she said. "And Mark?" I asked. "You protected him by sending him away?" She didn't answer, just walked to the living room, sat down, and said, "I tried to save one of you." He made his choice. Her voice was ice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked up court records, public files. Everything Mark had said was there, hidden in plain sight. The allegations against my dad? Dropped. No charges. No history of violence. Just a restraining order based entirely on Mark's testimony, which he now claimed was coached. There were no police reports, no social worker visits, no injuries. Just a mother with a well-spoken son saying the right things, and a judge who believed her. Days later, I called Mark again. He picked me up in an old car that rattled when it moved. We drove to the outskirts of town. He showed me a house I barely remembered. It was our dad's, vacant now, overgrown, boarded up. Inside, he had kept a box, letters, pictures, proof that our father had tried, desperately, to stay in our lives, to stay in my life. All returned, all unopened, all marked, returned to sender. Back at my apartment, I stared at the box Mark had handed me. It was old, beat up. The edges were frayed, one corner chewed, maybe by a dog, maybe just time. Inside were layers of papers, each more fragile than the last. But on the top lay a letter, my name written in faded ink. To Emma, from Dad. My hands shook as I opened it. I hope one day you'll read this. I hope your mom stops keeping me away from you. I know what she told you, that I was dangerous, unstable, a threat. But Emma, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped trying. Tears blurred the ink before I got to the second paragraph. I pulled out more letters, dozens, all addressed to me. Birthday cards, Christmas greetings. Some were scrawled and urgent, others long, reflective, gentle. Not a single one had reached me. Not one. I looked up at Mark. He was sitting on the opposite side of the room, staring out the window. Quiet, detached. How long did he send these? I asked. Every year, he replied, until the cancer made it too hard to write. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. He had cancer? Mark nodded. Lung. Lasted about a year. I was there when he died. I tried to say something. Anything. But my throat closed up. Mark stood, walked over, and handed me something else. A photo. Me, maybe 4 years old, grinning with ice cream all over my face. Mark stood behind me, arms around my shoulders. Dad was kneeling in front, holding the cone. We looked happy. On the back, written in my father's handwriting, for Emma. Your big brother will always be waiting. That's when it hit me. Not just sadness, not just betrayal. Grief. Grief for the father I'd been told to fear. Grief for the brother I'd been told to hate. Grief for the child I had been. Innocent, trusting, raised on a lie. When I got home that night, Mom was watching TV like nothing had changed. I stood in the doorway for a long time. She looked over, smiled. You okay? I didn't answer. I walked over and placed the photo on the coffee table, then the letter, then the rest of the box. She stared at it, didn't move. I know, I said. For a moment, she didn't react. Then she reached for the remote and muted the TV. Her expression didn't change. She looked almost tired. I always knew this day would come, she said. Her voice was too calm, almost rehearsed, like she'd practiced this confrontation in her head. I did what I had to, she continued. You don't know what it was like. Being trapped with a man like him, I couldn't let him take you. I couldn't risk it. I stepped closer. You used Mark, I said. You coached a 12-year-old into lying in court. Then you punished him for it. Her face hardened. I gave that boy everything, and he turned his back on me. No, I said. You turned your back on him. She stood up slowly. Do you really think you'd be where you are if I hadn't done what I did? College, freedom, safety. I protected you. By erasing my father? I snapped. By cutting out my brother like he didn't exist? You think you'd be better off if I'd done nothing? If I'd let your father take you on weekends, whisper poison into your ear, tell you I was the villain? She was yelling now, no longer calm. I stared at her. Maybe I'd rather have known the truth than grow up living someone else's version of it. She went silent, just stared at me, breathing heavy. Her hands clenched at her sides. For the first time, I realized something chilling. She didn't regret it. She didn't even question it. She believed what she'd done was right, because it gave her control. I left that night. I didn't pack anything. I didn't explain. I just walked out the door and didn't look back. When I reached Mark's apartment, I collapsed on the couch and sobbed for what felt like hours. He didn't say anything. Just let me cry. Eventually, he whispered, I tried so many times to tell you, but I figured you'd hate me more for ruining her image than for disappearing. He was right, because part of me, even after everything, wanted to believe she loved me. And maybe she did, in her own twisted way. But love built on lies isn't love at all. For the next few days, I drifted through life like a ghost. I couldn't bring myself to call Mom. I didn't answer her texts, but she didn't try very hard, just a few neutral messages. I hope you're okay. You'll understand one day. That was the part that scared me the most, how sure she was that one day I'd come back around and thank her for what she did, as if this was just another teenage rebellion, as if discovering that your entire childhood was orchestrated and censored was a phase. Mark gave me space. He didn't push. He let me sit in silence, let me stare at walls. And when I finally asked for more context, more proof, he gave me everything. Bank statements, legal files, photos, texts he'd saved, his school records, which showed a nosedive the year after the custody battle. And then he handed me a simple piece of paper, a college savings account summary. The account was set up by our grandparents before I was even born. It had both our names on it, Emma and Mark, meant to be split evenly. But sometime after the divorce, the paperwork changed. My name remained. His was removed. Did you know about this? I asked. Mark shook his head. No idea until a few years ago. I thought maybe our grandparents just stopped supporting me. I stared at the numbers. The account had nearly $80,000 in it at its peak. I used most of that money to pay for college. I thought it was Mom's. I thought it was a gift. Instead, it was stolen. I couldn't breathe, couldn't sit. I walked out of Mark's place and just wandered. My legs moved on their own. I ended up outside Mom's house. I don't know what I expected. An apology? A breakdown? An explanation that would make it okay? She opened the door like she'd been waiting. Come to talk? She asked, like nothing had happened. I held out the bank paper. You took his half. Her face didn't even flicker. I used it for your future, she said. Mark wouldn't have made it through college. You would. That's not your choice to make. It is when I'm the only parent trying to keep things afloat. She stepped aside, motioned for me to come in. I didn't move. You don't even feel bad about it, do you? I said quietly. Mom's eyes hardened. I feel bad that I had to make those choices, but I don't regret them. That hit harder than I thought it would. She didn't regret cutting out my father. She didn't regret alienating my brother. She didn't regret stealing his future. Because in her mind, it had all been necessary. You always said I was your miracle, I said slowly. Was I just the prize you won for destroying everyone else? She flinched, just barely. You were the one worth saving, she whispered. There it was, the unspoken truth. Mark had been collateral damage. Our dad was the enemy. Mark was the echo, and I was the only one she wanted to keep. I left again. I didn't even say goodbye. That night, I asked Mark something I'd been avoiding. What happened after you left Dad? He exhaled, sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed until he died. The cancer made him softer, quieter. But I think he just wanted to be forgiven. Did you? Mark looked down. I don't know. I still hear Mom's voice in my head, even now, saying I ruined everything, that I was a traitor, that I deserved to be forgotten. He looked up at me. She made sure we both hated ourselves, just for different reasons. I couldn't sleep that night, because he was right. My entire identity, the good daughter, the miracle, the obedient one, wasn't built on truth or merit. It was built on a comparison. I only shined because someone else had been pushed into the dark. And now I saw what that darkness had done. Mark wasn't broken. He was discarded. The next morning, I got a message from an old family friend. Heard things got messy. Just know your mom always did her best. I stared at the screen. That was her power. She was the martyr, the victim, the strong, single mom. No one ever questioned her, because no one ever saw what happened behind the curtain. But now I had, and I couldn't unsee it. It's strange how, even after everything, part of you still wants your mother to love you the right way, even if she lied, even if she stole, even if she ruined lives. There's still that small, desperate part of you that hopes she'll wake up one morning and say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong, I hurt you, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." But that morning never came. Instead, I got a voicemail. It came at 2:34 a.m. I was awake, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't going to listen, but curiosity, or maybe hope, won. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Emma, I know you're angry. I know you think I'm some villain, but I need you to understand something. I did everything for you. You were my light, my purpose. Your father never loved you the way I did. Mark, he always resented you. He always saw you as the reason our family fell apart. I protected you from that. Now he's filled your head with poison, and you don't even see it. You think you're free now, living with your brother in that filthy apartment? You'll see one day. He'll use you, like he used your father's death to get sympathy. That's all he's ever done. Make people feel sorry for him." She paused. "But I forgive you, and when you come back, because you will, I'll be here, like always." Click. I sat in the dark, holding the phone like it was burning my hands, not because I was shocked by what she said, but because I wasn't. She hadn't left the door open for reconciliation. She'd baited it, manipulated it, left just enough warmth in her voice to make me second-guess myself. She wasn't sorry. She was still playing the same game, controlling the narrative, undermining the truth, turning love into guilt. Again. And then, something in me broke, but not in the way it had before. Not in sadness, not in anger, in clarity. I finally saw her not as a mother, but as a person. A person who needed control more than connection, who would rather burn every bridge than admit she built them on a lie. The next morning, I left the apartment before Mark woke up. I needed air. I ended up at the cemetery. My father's grave was simple, weathered, a little forgotten. I stood there a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. Then I knelt and placed something on the stone, the first letter he ever wrote me, now opened, worn, folded at the edges. "I never stopped trying," I whispered. "I know." And finally, I let go. Later that day, I sat down with Mark. I told him about the voicemail. He didn't react with anger. He just nodded, like he'd heard it all before. "I'm sorry," I said, "for everything, for believing her, for not trying to find you." He smiled faintly. "You didn't know. She made sure of that. But I do now, and I don't want to live in her version of the story anymore." That night, I blocked her number. For real. Not just silence. Closure. Not because I hate her, but because I love myself enough now not to be manipulated again. She doesn't get to narrate my life anymore. She doesn't get to rewrite my story. That's mine now. I don't know if forgiveness will ever come. Not from me to her, and maybe not from her to me either. But that's no longer something I carry. What I carry now is mine. The silence between Mark and me is different now. Not heavy, not awkward, just honest. We don't try to force closeness. We let it grow where it wants to. Sometimes we laugh. Sometimes we remember things differently. Sometimes we cry for what was taken before either of us could stop it. But we do it together. And that's more than I ever thought I'd have. The truth didn't set me free. Not immediately. At first, it broke me. But now, It's building me. Not the girl mom raised, not the miracle child, not the shadow of someone else's pain. Just me. Someone who knows where she comes from, and finally gets to decide where she's going. Sometimes the most painful stories aren't the ones you remember, but the ones you were never allowed to know.